It was 1959. High above the Barents Sea, a Soviet Tu-95 Bear bomber, a roaring symbol of communist power, released its secret cargo. A sleek object fell away, its rocket igniting with a flash, pushing a top-secret military satellite towards orbit. For the Soviets, it was a triumph, another victory in the Cold War's space race. But down below, lurking in the icy darkness, another aircraft was waiting. Its crew wasn't there to watch or to jam signals. Their orders were almost unbelievable. They were there to steal it. This is the incredible and true story of a covert operation so audacious that it left Soviet engineers stunned when their brand new satellite technology was literally stolen in midair. The stage was set on a freezing night in early March 1959 in the skies north of Norway. This wasn't a battle fought with missiles or guns, but with hooks, cables, and pure, unadulterated courage. On one side were the elite pilots of the Soviet long-range aviation, tasked with guarding a revolutionary new spy system. On the other, the shadow warriors of the United States Air Force's 6,594th Test Group, who were assigned an impossible mission: to snatch a Soviet spacecraft from the sky before it ever reached orbit. The Cold War had just blasted into a new dimension. After the shock of the Sputnik launch in 1957, American intelligence was desperate to get its hands on Soviet satellite technology. They were particularly interested in the Zenit photoreconnaissance satellites, which the Soviets publicly called Cosmos to hide their true purpose. These orbiting spies were being designed to map America's most sensitive military sites' missile silos, naval bases, and airfields. Trying to recover a crashed satellite was like winning the lottery. The debris could be scattered across thousands of square miles of unforgiving ocean or frozen tundra. It was a search for a needle in a global haystack. The CIA and the U.S. Air Force knew they needed a more reliable way to get their hands on the technology. They needed a guaranteed sample. Their solution was a project of breathtaking ambition, a program so secret its details are still being declassified today. While the CIA was busy developing its own spy satellite, codenamed Corona, the Air Force was pursuing an even riskier path: mid-air recovery. The unit chosen for this high-stakes mission was the top-secret 6,594th Test Group, based out of Hickam Field in Hawaii. Their special tool for the job was a modified JC-13OB Hercules. This reliable four-engine workhorse had been transformed into a technological predator, an eagle designed to hunt in the upper atmosphere. Its crew was the best in the world: expert pilots, navigators, and a hand-picked team of recovery specialists who would perform the actual snatch. Their target wasn't the satellite itself, which would be moving far too fast in orbit. Instead, they were after the components that were jettisoned during the launch. U.S. intelligence, using advanced radar tracking from secret bases like Cobra Dane in Alaska, had carefully mapped the launch profiles from Soviet cosmodromes. They knew exactly where the booster stages and payload fairings would separate and tumble back to Earth, falling into a predictable corridor over the Arctic. A plan was to intercept one of these pieces. It could be the payload fairing that protected the satellite on its way up, or even an entire booster section. Any piece would be an intelligence goldmine, holding priceless secrets about Soviet metallurgy, rocket fuels, and engineering techniques. The pressure to succeed came from the very top. The man driving the operation on the ground was the formidable General Curtis LeMay, the head of Strategic Air Command, famous for his aggressive, no-nonsense demand for actionable intelligence. In the air, the man in the pilot's seat of the C-130 was Major John Jack Thompson, a veteran pilot known for his ice-cool nerves under extreme pressure. He and his crew had trained relentlessly for this moment, practicing the delicate aerial maneuver over and over again in the skies above the Pacific. The moment was critical. The Soviets were on the verge of deploying a fully operational fleet of spy satellites. America desperately needed to understand this new threat, to get inside the technology of the eye in the sky that was being built to watch their every move. The system they developed was ingenious. Trailing from the back of the C-130 was a long looped cable system, held taut by two poles. At the end of the loop were a series of grappling hooks. The idea was to fly the C-130 directly into the path of the descending piece of Soviet hardware. The falling object, slowed by a parachute, would get caught in the loop. The hooks would snag the parachute's lines, and a winch system inside the aircraft would then reel the prize in. It was like fishing, but 1,000 times more complex and dangerous, trying to catch a multi-ton object falling from the edge of space. On that March night, everything was in place. Major Thompson and his crew were flying a precise, pre-calculated pattern over the Barents Sea, their eyes scanning the darkness. Radar operators on the ground and in the air fed them constant updates. They were on a razor's edge, deep inside Soviet-controlled airspace, flying without lights, maintaining radio silence. If they were detected, the mission would be scrubbed at best. At worst, they could be shot down. Then they got the signal. A launch had been detected. A Soviet rocket was climbing into the sky. The clock started ticking. Thompson's navigator made minute calculations, guiding the C-130 onto the perfect intercept course. The recovery specialists in the back prepared the gear, their faces illuminated by the dim red glow of the cabin lights. The tension was immense. As the Soviet booster separated and began its fiery descent, its parachute deployed, just as U.S. intelligence had predicted. It was now a glowing dot against the stars, falling right where they expected it. Thompson throttled the engines, lining up the Hercules for the approach. This was it, the moment of truth. The crew in the back could see it now, a ghostly shape descending through the night. The target was getting bigger, fast. Thompson had to maintain perfect altitude and speed. Too high, and they'd miss it. Too low, and the falling debris could collide with their aircraft, spelling disaster for everyone. He called out adjustments, his voice calm and steady over the intercom, betraying none of the immense pressure he was under. The crewmen in the cargo bay braced themselves. The loops were out. The hooks were ready. With a final delicate adjustment, Thompson flew the C-130 directly at the descending parachute. There was a sudden jolt, a loud thud that echoed through the entire airframe. Success! The hooks had snagged the parachute lines. The system had worked. Immediately, the winch operators began their work, carefully reeling in their catch. It was a slow, nerve-wracking process. The weight of the Soviet hardware strained the cables, and the C-130 bucked and swayed as it fought to stay stable. But slowly and surely, a large, scorched piece of metal was pulled up the ramp and into the cargo bay of the Hercules. They had it. They had stolen a piece of a Soviet rocket right out of the sky. Without a second to waste, Thompson banked the C-130 hard and headed west, flying low and fast towards friendly airspace in Norway. They had just pulled off one of the most daring intelligence heists in history, and now they had to get away clean. As they crossed the coast, they knew they had done the impossible. When the captured hardware was analyzed back in the United States, it provided a treasure trove of information. The alloys, the welding techniques, the design of the fuel systems, it was all there. It gave American engineers a direct look into the strengths and weaknesses of Soviet rocketry, information that would prove invaluable in the years to come. For the Soviets, it was a complete mystery. A crucial piece of their launch vehicle had simply vanished. They knew its trajectory. They knew where it should have landed, but search crews found nothing. They suspected an accident, a malfunction, but the truth was far more unbelievable. It would be decades before they learned that their technology had been audaciously plucked from the sky by a specialized American crew. This incredible mission remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War. The men of the 6,594th Test Group went on to perform many more of these mid-air recovery missions. retrieving film canisters from America's own spy satellites in a program that became a cornerstone of U.S. intelligence gathering. But their first, most daring catch was a piece of a Soviet rocket, stolen in the dead of night, a testament to the incredible ingenuity and bravery that defined the secret battles of the Cold War. This is the story of a secret war, fought not with missiles, but with grappling hooks and steel nerves, thousands of feet above the frozen Arctic. The prize? Top-secret Soviet space technology. The mission? To snatch it out of the sky as it fell back to Earth. This was Operation Cold Feet, and its successors, some of the most audacious and dangerous covert operations of the Cold War. The plan was a masterpiece of timing and sheer audacity. It all started with a flash on a radar screen at the Ballistic Missile Early Warning System. A Soviet rocket launch. But what went up had to come down. And when it did, the United States Air Force was ready to catch it. From a desolate, forward-operating base, possibly Thule in Greenland, or a hidden airstrip in the Aleutians, a specially modified JC-130 Hercules would scramble. Its destination, a precise, invisible catch box in the sky over the international waters of the Arctic Ocean. This wasn't your standard cargo plane. Inside the cavernous fuselage, the atmosphere crackled with tension. The massive rear ramp was wide open, exposing the crew to a punishing -60-degree slipstream that could freeze exposed skin in seconds. This was their office, a windy, freezing precipice on the edge of the stratosphere. At the heart of this incredible machine was the mid-air recovery system, or MARS. It was a complex, trapeze-like rig of steel capture cables and a winch powered by its own monstrous Allison T-56 engine. Recovery specialists, bundled in heavy Arctic gear and tethered by safety lines, stood at their stations. Their eyes, shielded by goggles, were glued to the vast, black sky, waiting. Up in the cockpit, Major Thompson gripped the yoke, his hands steady despite the adrenaline. Over the intercom, the navigator's voice was a calm, steady countdown through the chaos. Target object predicted in 3 minutes. Altitude 85,000 feet and falling fast. The target was a piece of Soviet space hardware, maybe a blocky upper stage from a launch vehicle or a payload fairing. Having done its job in orbit, it was now a dead, twisting piece of metal, plunging at terminal velocity through the thin upper atmosphere. The JC-130 had to be in the perfect spot at the perfect time, directly underneath it. A miscalculation of a few hundred feet or a few seconds, and the mission would be a total failure. The stakes couldn't be higher. This was a direct line into the enemy's most advanced technological secrets. Then the call came. Object acquired. Visual. 12 o'clock high. Through the windscreen, Thompson and his co-pilot saw it. A faint, glowing speck, growing rapidly larger, leaving a thin, ghostly trail of ionized air. It was tumbling end over end, a wounded bird falling from space. The navigator began calling out rapid-fire corrections, his voice a staccato rhythm against the roar of the engines. Come left 5 degrees. Descent rate 200 feet per minute. Hold it ... double quotes. The chase was on. At 0200 hours local time, the Hercules, flying at 25,000 feet, was in a deadly aerial ballet, trying to match its course, and speed with an object hurtling downwards at several hundred miles per hour. In the back, the recovery crew braced themselves. The winch engine whined to life, its pitch rising. The capture cables, with their weighted drogue lines, streamed out into the inky blackness behind the plane, forming a giant inverted net designed to snare their prize. The object was now just 1,000 feet above them, a dark, jagged shape silhouetted against the starfield. It was a moment of truth, the culmination of years of planning and intelligence gathering. But this is where the cold, hard laws of physics decided to enter the fight. As the Soviet hardware slammed into the thicker atmosphere, its descent became violent and unpredictable. It wasn't a graceful arc. It was a chaotic, spinning, uncontrollable plunge. The JC-130, a massive 70-ton aircraft with immense inertia, simply couldn't mimic these wild gyrations. Target is oscillating. Severe tumble. The recovery officer yelled over the intercom, his voice tight with urgency. The prized piece of technology, the key to unlocking Soviet secrets, was whipping past them. One moment it was just a few hundred feet to port. The next it was careening wildly to starboard. The weighted cables of the Mars system snaked and thrashed in the turbulent wake of the falling debris. A single strike from the heavy, falling object could sever a cable, or far worse, shear off the Hercules' entire tail section, sending them all into a fatal spin. The mission had gone from precision to pure survival in a matter of seconds. In the cockpit, warning lights flashed red across the console. The turbulence generated by the object's wake rocked the giant aircraft like a toy. Major Thompson fought the controls, his arms straining against the violent forces trying to rip the plane from his command. His co-pilot rattled off airspeed and descent rates, his voice strained but professional. They were caught in a deadly dance with a multi-ton piece of wreckage in the middle of the Arctic night. The navigator, his eyes glued to a specialized radar screen, shouted updates that were already half a second behind what they were seeing with their own eyes. The margin for error had evaporated. It was gone. For the recovery crew harnessed in the open rear of the plane, it was a scene from a waking nightmare. The freezing hurricane wind screamed through the open ramp, a relentless physical assault. Ice began to form on the Mars equipment, adding another layer of danger. Through their night vision goggles, they watched the Soviet hardware flash past them in fleeting, terrifying glimpses. They saw tantalizing details, a flash of Cyrillic lettering stenciled on a panel, the charred black scorch marks from re-entry heating, the stark white of exposed internal insulation. It was so close they could almost reach out and touch it, yet it remained maddeningly, impossibly out of reach. The winch operator stood with his hands on the controls, poised to act, but he dared not engage the capture. The risk of the tumbling object, snapping the cables and destroying the entire multi-million-dollar system, was too great. The mission, the product of years of planning and a monumental investment, was literally slipping through their fingers. In the vast, unforgiving darkness of the Arctic night, failure seemed not just possible, but absolutely certain. The hunt had become a desperate, losing battle against gravity and chaos. Have you ever heard of fishing in the sky? Not for fish, but for top-secret Soviet space junk, falling from orbit like a metal meteor. Today, we re-diving into one of the most audacious and little-known operations of the Cold War, Project Cold Feet. This isn't science fiction. It's a real-life story of guts, genius, and a whole lot of risk. Imagine you're the pilot of a massive JC-130 Hercules, a 4-engine beast of a cargo plane. Your mission? To snatch a piece of a Soviet rocket out of the sky as it plummets back to Earth over the freezing Arctic. It's a high-stakes game where the prize is priceless intelligence, and the cost of failure is a fiery mid-air collision. This operation, part of a clandestine program, pushed aviation technology to its absolute limits. They had to invent a whole new way to do this, using a system of hooks and cables deployed from the back of the plane. Think of it like a giant, flying grappling hook, trying to snag a tumbling, multi-ton object falling at thousands of feet per minute. The precision required was insane. A fraction of a second off, and your history. Now, let's put you in the cockpit with the hero of our story, Major Thompson. He's staring at his radar, watching the target, a piece of Soviet hardware, tumbling chaotically through the sky. The initial plan was to fly alongside it and snag it, but it's not working. The debris is too unpredictable, a wild metal beast spinning out of control. Every failed attempt brings them closer to the ground, and fuel is burning fast. The tension in the cockpit is thick enough to cut with a knife. The entire mission and their lives are on the line. It's at this moment of near despair that Major Thompson makes a decision that sounds completely insane. It's a choice born from pure pilot's intuition, a gut feeling when all the training manuals go out the window. He radios his crew and the recovery team on the ground, his voice steady despite the chaos. He says they can't match the object's tumble. They can't chase it. Instead, they have to lead it. They have to get underneath it and let it fall onto them. Let that sink in. He is intentionally placing his multi-million-dollar aircraft and his entire crew directly in the path of a massive falling piece of metal. It's the ultimate gamble. The navigator, under immense pressure, starts punching in numbers, calculating a new intercept course. He has to predict exactly where this tumbling chunk of a rocket will be in the next 30 seconds. No room for error. Thompson shoves the yoke forward, pushing the Hercules into a steep, gut-wrenching dive. The engines roar as they race the falling debris to a specific point in the empty sky, thousands of feet below it. Inside the plane, everyone is holding on, their knuckles white. They're not just flying. They're in a controlled fall, a deadly dance with gravity. Then comes the command, a roar that cuts through the engine noise. Now, level off, mark. Thompson pulls back on the yoke, and the huge aircraft flattens its descent with a groan. For a moment, they are flying straight and level, a stable platform in the middle of a storm. And above them, the Soviet debris is no longer tumbling past them. From their perspective, it's now dropping almost straight down, like a bomb aimed right at their heads. In the cavernous cargo hold, the rear ramp is wide open, exposing the crew to the howling Arctic wind. The recovery officer, staring up into the sky, sees his chance. He screams into his headset, "Stand by for capture. Winch on full tension." The recovery system, a web of high-tensile cables and hooks, is now streaming almost vertically upwards from the plane, forming a stationary net in the sky. It's a surreal, unbelievable sight. The target, a jagged 15-foot section of a booster rocket, enters the capture zone. Then, impact. The sound is deafening, a horrifying shriek of tearing, grinding metal that reverberates through the entire airframe. The whole JC-130 shudders violently, as if it's been struck by a giant's hammer. Red alarm lights flash across the cockpit, bells screaming. For one heart-stopping second, every person on board thinks a wing has been ripped off, that this is the end. But the Hercules, true to its name, holds together. The structure is battered, but it's intact. And then a cry of pure triumph from the cargo bay cuts through the alarms. It's on the line. We have a capture. The recovery specialist is screaming with a mix of terror and elation. The hooks have found their mark. They've snagged the beast. But the fight isn't over, not by a long shot. The winch engine immediately screams in protest, straining under the immense, erratic weight of the captured prize. The Soviet hardware is now swinging wildly beneath the aircraft like a giant, destructive pendulum. Every swing threatens to throw the Hercules into an unrecoverable spin. The plane is lurching and bucking, and Major Thompson is fighting the controls with all his strength, trying to keep them stable. For the next 10 minutes, which must have felt like an eternity, the winch operators perform a delicate and dangerous ballet. They expertly apply and release tension on the cable, slowly, carefully, dampening the wild swings of the debris. It's a nerve-wracking process. One wrong move and the cable could snap, or the swinging motion could overwhelm the aircraft's controls. Finally, with one last, heavy thud that echoes through the plane, the scorched and battered piece of Soviet technology is dragged up the ramp and into the cargo hold. The beast is caged. Immediately, specialists swarm the object, their faces grim and focused, quickly attaching heavy restraint chains to lock it down. The massive rear ramp begins to close, sealing away the cold Arctic night and their incredible prize. They did it. They went fishing in the sky and caught themselves a Soviet rocket. This incredible feat of airmanship and engineering gave the United States invaluable insight into Soviet rocket technology. It was a secret victory in the Cold War, a story of courage and ingenuity that deserves to be told. It shows that sometimes the most audacious plans, the ones that sound completely crazy, are the only ones that work. What an incredible story, right? It just goes to show what human beings are capable of when pushed to the limit. The JC-130, its mission accomplished, turned south toward its recovery base. Aboard, the crew, buzzing with adrenaline, finally had a moment to examine their prize. It wasn't just a piece of debris. It was a substantial section of a Semyorka R-7 booster stage. They could see intricate plumbing, engine components, and even parts of an instrument module. The sheer scale of this intelligence coup was monumental. For months, top scientists from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the legendary Skunk Works at Lockheed would pore over this hardware. They would dissect it piece by piece, unlocking secrets that no spy photo or distant observation could ever reveal. They learned about advanced Soviet welding techniques, the composition of their unique alloys, and the methods they used for shielding their avionics. Each discovery was a small victory, providing a crucial technological edge in the high-stakes game of the Cold War. The operational success was total, and the deception was perfect. Soviet tracking stations, diligently monitoring the launch from the ground, saw exactly what they were expected to see. Their data confirmed that the payload had failed to achieve orbit. They simply wrote it off as another unfortunate, but not uncommon, booster failure. The idea that their technology had been intercepted and stolen right out of the sky, just moments after launch, was completely beyond their imagination. They were utterly unaware of the audacious heist that had just taken place. Back at OKB-1, Sergei Korolev's elite design bureau, the engineers were left scratching their heads. They were stunned, poring over telemetry data that just didn't add up. The readouts indicated a perfectly normal stage separation, exactly as planned. But then, there was just silence. A mysterious, inexplicable loss of the entire stage. There was no explosion, no catastrophic failure. It just vanished from their tracking. They could only puzzle over the anomaly, never suspecting the real reason for its disappearance. The perfect crime had been committed in the vast emptiness of the stratosphere. The legacy of this incredible mission, and the broader Corona and Mars operations it was a part of, is profound. It's not an exaggeration to say that the intelligence gathered from these mid-air captures provided a vital technological advantage during one of the most critical and tense phases of the Cold War. It allowed the U.S. to understand Soviet capabilities, not just guess at them. Furthermore, the tactics they pioneered were groundbreaking. The sheer precision required for aerial interception and recovery of falling space hardware was astounding. These techniques remain some of the most secretive and closely guarded in the entire U.S. military arsenal. They were the direct precursors to modern concepts we see today, like the recovery of advanced drones in midair. It's even been speculated that similar principles could be adapted for anti-satellite operations. The skills honed in these dark Arctic skies have a lineage that extends to the cutting edge of modern military technology. For the men who flew these missions, public recognition was impossible. The crews of the 6,594th Test Group could never be celebrated for these specific highly classified operations. Their heroism had to remain in the shadows. However, their broader work and their incredible record of success did not go entirely unnoticed. The unit was awarded the prestigious Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, a testament to their collective skill and dedication, even if the true nature of their greatest accomplishments remained a secret. Their courage and unparalleled skill wrote a forgotten chapter in the history of the space race. This wasn't a story of public triumphs, televised rocket launches, or astronauts planting flags. This was a story of shadowy, daring thefts carried out in the silent, star-filled sky over the top of the world. These pilots and their crews proved that in the Cold War, The final frontier wasn't just a destination to be explored. It was a battlefield to be contested. Think about it. This was a heist of incredible proportions. But it wasn't executed in a bank vault or a secure facility. It was a heist executed in the stratosphere, a testament to human audacity, engineering genius, and the sheer will to succeed in the face of seemingly impossible odds. For decades, this story remained hidden, a silent victory won in the vast, cold darkness between worlds. And this is just one of the countless untold stories from the long shadow cast by the Second World War, the era we call the Cold